Our special guest today is Danielle Freitag. Danielle is an author, the co-founding executive director of Action 169, and she has overcome severe addiction in the commercial sex industry. She's a licensed alcohol and drug counselor who received her degree from Minnesota State University. She has continued to work in a variety of settings as a counselor and advocate, providing direct support, care, and counseling for women in recovery. And her mission is to empower women to overcome substance use and to enable those in the strip club industry to know their intrinsic worth. Danielle Freitag is the creator of a trauma-informed, faith-centered counseling program that promotes holistic restoration through evidence-based practices, including the creative arts. She's the author of Best Care Practices, a manual for service providers, and The Garden Keys, 22 Keys of Restoration, Volumes 1 and 2. Danielle Freitag, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
All right. Thanks, Chris, for having me.
Danielle, there are so many aspects of this topic to discuss, but let's begin with your story, which is described as a captivating story of transformation that inspires hope and offers solutions.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's set a time limit. You cut me off. I'll try to keep it short. There's so much, which is in part why I wrote a couple books. Grew up in small town, southern Minnesota. Honestly, great family. Went to school, all the things, played in sports. And in my teen years, just really began to struggle, started early drug use. And there was alcoholism, growing up in my home. Thankfully, my dad is now sober. There's a great story there of transformation. But I really believe that there was, a part of me that just really struggled from that. And so seeking older male comfort, and ended up in a relationship with an older gentleman, older man. And it was through that quote unquote relationship that led me into the strip club industry. So just after my 18th birthday, started working in the strip clubs in Minneapolis and was stuck there for several years. So, that's the short version of being essentially groomed into the commercial sex industry.
I've heard the word groomed so often by survivors. Can you share some examples of what that actually means? Because I think some people just might not know what's coming, what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for me, one of the ways that, now looking back and doing what I do now, I can see a lot clearer how I was groomed. I was already struggling with substance use, so alcohol and drugs, and the boyfriend that I had at the time. And keep in mind, I was still in school. So I'm going to school, like high school, but going to parties, things like that. And the boyfriend that I had, what ended up happening is he had essentially coerced me into doing his words, harmless striptease for one of his friends. And it was his friend that ended up pursuing me, and really through buying gifts, taking me places that I thought at the time were exciting. Again, still trying to go to school, playing sports, but also really struggling. So grooming would also have been just the attention. Really, youth are vulnerable because they're youth, but then add into the fact that I grew up in a home where there was alcoholism, was already struggling with substance use. Those vulnerabilities, added to being having that happen. So, I hope that answers your question. I'm just trying to think about, there's so many, different ways of grooming, but for me, that's when I look back, that's what happened. It was the substance use. It was the attention. It was, all of those things.
And those seem to be fairly common, like I mentioned, the other survivors I spoke to. So thanks for sharing those.
Yeah.
Many people think of the adult film industry when this topic comes up. Define commercial sex exploitation so people understand everything that's involved, and is it more than just pornography?
Sure. So this is a great question, by the way. I was reading through the notes, and this is a good question because a lot of times we hear the word human trafficking out there, right? Well, really, we need to look at the full spectrum. Commercial sexual exploitation, which does include being prostituted. It includes being brought into pornography, live sex shows, stripping, personal sexual servitude, escort services. I can't tell you the number of women that I've worked with who, through limited choices, maybe they started working in the strip club and then they got into escort services, which is a form of trafficking. Somebody's profiting off of their exploitation. So sex tourism, mail order brides. I mean, there's just, the list goes on, but that is commercial sexual exploitation.
When did you co-found Action 169, and who worked with you to get started?
So Action 169 has been around since 2014, and actually began from a group of individuals, good friends of ours, my husband and I, a couple others. We actually started having prayer meetings. So we are a faith-based organization, and I have no shame in saying that, because it is through my faith that not only I came out of everything, but then also I believe the opportunities we've had is also because of that. So we started actually prayer and just really looking into the issue of exploitation, trafficking, and how can we be a support to those who have been affected? How can we provide a bridge of services? And it's never been about rescuing. It's been about meeting women where they're at. And so what ended up happening is I got to fulfill a dream, which was actually to go back into the strip club industry and not to work, but to actually build a relationship with the women who are still there. And, to this day, that is our number one ministry focus. Number one, we do, an array of other things. But co-founder friends of ours, my husband as well. And that's really how we started. So since 2014.
And how did you choose the name Action 169?
Yeah. So a lot of times people think that it's because, Minnesota Highway 169. And interestingly enough, we had a billboard that we put up on Highway 169, but that's not the reason for our name. It comes from the book of Acts, chapter 16, verse 9. And Paul is actually given a dream. He's given a vision of a man in Macedonia who is suffering. And what's great about this verse, the next verse 10, is that after he gets the word, after he gets the vision, he immediately takes action and he goes to Macedonia. But then you read further into the chapter and it's actually a woman that they first encounter. And so it's Acts chapter 16, verse 9, 169.
Did you begin with the same mission that you have today, or did it expand as Action 169's resources grew?
Yeah, so we definitely have expanded. We have three main avenues of reach: prevention. So a couple of our prevention programs definitely work towards building stronger families. We have things like the daddy-daughter dance, where dads get the opportunity to hear an incredible dad talk, bring their daughters to a dance, build that relationship. We also have a prevention program called Runway for Action, where we have mentorship and provide high-end prom dresses to girls in high school. So there's a whole story there. It's so cool. But we have prevention, we have intervention. We've always had intervention, which is our strip club outreach, where we are building relationships, bringing gifts into the strip clubs, no strings attached. And then we also have our restoration program. And I actually want to just share very briefly that the dream, and it's still here, but the dream was to be able to provide restorative care to those who are choosing to get out, to those who are out and looking for support. And we've actually, through intervention and restoration, been able to provide support services one way or another to about 600 women, some with children. And we did open up a home in 2020. Yes, the timing, right? 2020, everything that happened. But yes, and our adoption went through. So I became a mother, right, in 2020. And then we opened up Rose House, and we're open for just about 4 years. Just most recently, we're kind of shifting gears. It's been good. It's also been challenging. We have been able to provide housing support for a period of time, and kind of are in the deciding factor of what to do there. But we're still providing support services, individual care groups, and it's been since 2014, the stories. But the neat thing, I've been able to meet some incredible women who some get out, some go on to other things, and then there's others who are still working, for example, in the strip clubs, and it's what they're wanting to do right now. So still going to meet them where they're at.
Action 169 is located in Fairmont, Minnesota. When people think of the commercial sex trade, they probably don't think of it much of a problem in Fairmont, Minnesota, with a population of 10,200. Do we have the wrong impression of wholesome Midwest, and what's actually happening in rural America with sex trade?
Yeah, so another really good question. I'd be interested to hear, I know, Chris, that you've done several interviews, and that's great that you're meeting with survivors and hearing. It'd be interesting to hear, go back and listen to all your other podcasts and hear what is said. But as far as Minnesota goes, I'm just going to give a fact or a stat here as a Minnesota fact. So in just 2021, there were 335 tips in Minnesota. So from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, that means that there were 335 tips. 119 of them were the victims or survivors, I should say, overcomers of human trafficking. In those cases, 98 were identified, and they involved 148 victims. The state recorded 75 sex trafficking cases and 8 labor cases. And actually, this is an old stat, but the Twin Cities is still, and it definitely was, in the top 13 U.S. cities for child sex trafficking. Take into account, right, that there are 25, maybe, roughly 25 strip clubs in Minnesota. Wherever there is commercial sexual exploitation, wherever there are strip clubs, there will be sex trafficking. That is an absolute fact from having worked in the strip clubs for 6 years. It just is. And so, yes, there's exploitation happening here. There's trafficking happening right in Minnesota.
Obviously, money is a driver, or maybe the driver of the commercial sex trade. But is it essentially, for lack of a better term, mom and pop strip clubs, or is it more of an organized industry?
I would definitely say an organized industry. And from seeing the inner workings of family ownership of a certain brand of strip clubs, the things that were happening behind the doors. Also, when it comes to recruiting, right, there was a lot of recruiting happening in strip clubs as well. So someone being brought into sex trafficking, escorting through the strip clubs. So it's not just this, I always laughed at the term gentleman's strip club, the gentleman's club. It's yeah. So no, I mean, to answer your question, definitely not what you say, mom and pop?
Mom and pop, yeah.
Mom and pop, yeah, no.
Well, I believe I've read statistics that this is actually the number one illegal organized industry in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can't Google human trafficking or exploitation without seeing 6 articles over the last week or so, unfortunately.
Right.
And I think even more unfortunately is you're seeing more commonly now, people involved in it are your teacher, your coach, your people of clergy. And it can happen anywhere from and to anyone.
Yep. And it's getting exposed. And that's the good thing, is that there has been a highlight. And because of great organizations, survivors speaking out, people, listening to survivors, there is this, for lack of a better word, exposure happening where it's coming to the light, it's coming to the surface. And so, yeah.
Well, and that's a big reason why I've made this a personal topic for me. Great. I had no idea. I had my head in the sand, live in, suburbia America, and had a guest on a few years ago, one by the name of Andy Berger, who was trafficked at the age of 6 months by her family.
Yeah.
And I was just oblivious to it. And then I just learned about her and other people like her and like yourself that have gone through this. And so, like you said, I'm trying to put as much of a spotlight on there as possible. And it's great to see others are as well. And I appreciate the work that you do and being so open about what's happening and what has happened to you.
Thanks, Chris. And I just want to interject, if I may.
Sure, of course.
I just want to thank you as well for putting a highlight on this. Previous to us getting the opportunity to do this, I was looking through your podcasts and some of the topics, and they're fantastic. So listeners, I just want to encourage you, go back, go through the podcast that Chris has.
Thank you. And that was an unsolicited plug, so I appreciate that, but thank you. Danielle, what are the root causes of women's exploitation, and how much do socioeconomic and cultural factors contribute to exploitation?
Yeah. So, typically it's women and girls. But yes, boys are trafficked as well. Boys are exploited. But predominantly women, girls, people of color, LGBTQ, youth involved in the juvenile system. But a deeper response, and I was thinking about this, what do I really believe the root causes are? Yes, socioeconomic status has a lot to do with this. But looking at my own story, I grew up in a beautiful 3-story Tudor style home by the water. Parents, mom a teacher, dad business owner, really came from a great family, and yet was groomed into this. And when I look at my story, yes, my dad was there, but there was also alcoholism in the home. And so he wasn't, well enough to have that father-daughter relationship. I think that I was really lacking. And so to answer the question, I really believe that fatherlessness is a huge root cause. And so building up the family where there's stronger father-daughter bonds, I believe is important. I really believe that our culture right now, like this, the family is just under attack. And so building up strong families is key.
And are we talking mostly about young women and sometimes men who are lured into this industry, or do women who are older also fall prey?
I would say yes, there's older women who fall prey, but there's definitely more. It's the younger girl. Yeah, that'd be the younger
Just
girl.
more easily swayable.
Yeah, yes, and then to add to this, being in Minnesota, there's a lot of services for the under 18. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. There were some services available for the under 18. And I had the opportunity to just help a little bit with implementing the safe harbor laws, which actually made services more available to like the 18 to 24 or the 18 to 25. Because the thing is, when you're young and you get groomed into this, it's like you're stuck. Like I was stuck, and there were several times I wanted out, hard to get out, and then finding the right services. And so definitely, that 18 to 24, 25 range, I believe really is where a lot of services are needed right now and support.
What are the biggest challenges faced in combating the exploitation of women? Is it the reluctance of women themselves to leave the situation, maybe because they need the money?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It becomes, and I'll speak for myself, like it became a lifestyle, and it got worse. You can only survive so long in an environment where there's drug use, where there's abuse. So yeah.
In your experience working with women, how often do substance abuse addiction and involvement in the commercial sex trade go hand in hand?
I would say 90 to 95%. I'm actually a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And when I was working as a counselor, just, working with individuals coming out of drug and alcohol use, some wanting to be there, some not wanting to be there at all. Many of the women that I ended up meeting with were actually describing incidents of exploitation or incidents of trafficking without having really the verbiage for it. Whether it be mild, moderate, or severe, there's usually a substance use disorder or substance use happening for the women who are in the industry or who are being exploited.
So what does it take to create a success story where a woman leaves the trade? Will most eventually leave the trade on their own, or do the people in the business just simply discard them when they're done?
Well, from working with the incredible women that I have just had the privilege to work with, many of them are leaving in ways on their own. However, there's always a point of intersect. Like looking back, I had points of intersect with law enforcement. They didn't know what was going on. I didn't like them at the time. But there's always that point, or like a counselor. So there's always somebody who, personally, I believe can make the difference of saying something, of being, a support. But from providing services and doing intervention in the strip clubs, a lot of times it's a woman getting to the place where she realizes like this, I can't do this anymore. I want out. I need something different. And so that's why we here at Action 169, it's more of, here's a bridge. Should you choose, should you want to get out, here's some options for you.
I mentioned that Fairmont is a small community. I'm sure many people in smaller communities can't imagine commercial sex exploitation happens in their towns. How can communities be educated about the signs of exploitation and the importance of addressing it?
Well, number one is to address it and to realize that this is happening, you know, in our own towns, in our own neighborhoods. And so then, just looking at what ways prevention can happen, learning the signs. There's so much information out there. I mean, really, that you can find on the internet of looking into ways to prevent exploitation and recognizing that it's happening. So I think too, number one, it is just realizing, yes, it's happening, and acknowledging that it's happening, and not thinking that, oh, this is just something that happens over there. I don't do this as much anymore, but I used to always bring up that movie Taken, right? Like, so for those of you who've seen the movie Taken, right? She goes to a different country. She's kidnapped. That is not typical. The way that exploitation trafficking is happening domestically is through grooming, is through befriending. It's not like this kidnapped in the Walmart parking lot, and I'm not saying that kidnapping doesn't happen, but the way that it's predominantly happening is through grooming.
I think you're at least the second or third person guest on the show to reference Taken regarding this topic.
Good.
What laws or policies can communities adopt to provide better legal protection for women?
Okay, this question was a little tricky for me. I need to be straightforward. I'm definitely more in the avenue of restorative care, and so when it comes to like laws and policies, I actually had to look this up, and I was thinking of a couple survivor friends who they would be great at answering this, and so I'm actually going to read the following. And so this is my response to that question. So it was about in 2000 that there was the landmark Trafficking Victims Protection Act. That's a mouthful. That really actually laid the groundwork for the federal response to human trafficking. But one of the models that I would encourage listeners, if you're not familiar with the equality model, to look that up. So the equality model actually prioritizes the rights of those who have been exploited while holding buyers and exploiters accountable for the harms that they have caused. So that's what we really, I believe some places have implemented it, but that is definitely needs to be, and I believe it came out of Sweden. So the equality model.
How can women be empowered to protect themselves from exploitation?
Oh gosh. These days, one of the things that we are teaching more so to, especially these, a lot of the younger gals or gals in high school, is internet safety. Social media, cell phones, the technology contributes greatly to exploitation. And so just having some internet smarts, right? Not chatting it up with someone that they don't know. Internet safety, definitely.
Well, that's a great point. I had a guest on a few weeks ago, Donna Rice Hughes, who's focused on that and working on legislation. And so again, listeners, another shameless plug here, but go back and watch that show for internet safety, because she gave some great examples and some great websites just for learning materials.
Awesome.
I guess maybe as a follow-up to that, the internet, social media, cell phones, and other technologies have contributed greatly to the commercial sex exploitation industry. Can technology play any role in preventing and addressing the exploitation?
Yeah, definitely. Putting out the right materials. So we had a gal who did a lot of really incredible graphics and putting together media for Action 169 for our social media. And so just getting the right facts out there, getting the right information out there. And we would actually have media or carousels, they're called, that would be targeted for the young person to help them learn how to keep themselves safe. We did a ebook, the Freedom Fighter Challenge, which actually gave specifics, how to be safe, how to recognize trafficking. So yeah, media can be used. I mean, just like you're doing here, right? With this podcast, is getting survivors' voices out there, getting the right information into people's hearts and ears, so that they can take effective action.
Danielle, Action 169 is a mission: prevention, intervention, and restoration. Take us through each of those, how you do it, and the results you've seen.
Yeah. So intervention, I want to focus on that one actually, just for now. Our intervention avenue or program is strip club outreach. And so since 2014, we have been going into some of the same clubs, building a relationship with the women. We see some get out, some are still there. There's usually a high turnover rate. But again, that is all about being a support, building a bridge, and being able to provide resources should the time come. So that's really been my focus actually since 2014, just again, because I came out of all of that. So that's, I would say our intervention program is one of my favorites, but then we also have our restorative care and then our prevention program as well. And the neat thing with, intervention and restoration is, should someone decide that they're ready to get out, or they want support, or they want help, if we're a good fit, then we do have support groups. We have online. There's a couple gals I actually meet with online. They're not even in Minnesota, right? But they, through the internet, right, found Action 169, and I'm able to meet with them. And so, yeah, so a prevention program is really about building the family, and of course, preventing exploitation, providing the right information to people so that this doesn't happen.
Can you take us through that intervention part or that process? I mean, just walking into a strip club and say, "Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm here to help you." How does that work?
Yeah. So the nice thing is that I get to say, I'm Danielle. I know the ups and downs of the strip club industry. I'm just here to be, a support. And we bring gifts, and the gals love gifts. And, at this point, we've been going, there's actually 2 clubs we've been going to since 2014. And so, there's conversation happening with the managers. And there's really a care there. Sometimes we'll bring something for them. And so I've been kicked out of one. We have been kicked out of one club. That is the one that I actually worked at for several years. And so know those managers. So there's a whole story there. You're going to have to read the Garden Keys for that story. That's a wild one. So, yep.
And where can people find that book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever
Perfect.
books, yeah.
Action 169 also offers an online seminar designed for parents who desire to raise confident, godly youth in today's hypersexualized culture. What does the webinar include, and how can parents sign up for it if they'd like?
Yeah, so we actually had Kristen Jensen, who is the author of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and founder of Defend Young Minds, on that webinar. And it is great. There are tips, tools, resources, and education available. That's actually, you can find that on our website. It's action169.com /webinar for parents. And again, it's, I'm just going to read it here. It's a unique online webinar designed for parents who desire to raise confident, godly youth in a hypersexualized culture.
I know that you've personally worked with the state of Minnesota. Does Action 169 collaborate with other nonprofits or any government agencies? And if not, would you do so if it would increase Action 169's reach and effectiveness?
Yes, we would. I had the opportunity to speak, sharing part of my story, but then just also had the honor of speaking in front of just about 300 law enforcement officers here in the state of Minnesota. And that was a while back, but that opportunity was really incredible. I had one of the investigating officers, he'll call, on occasion, share a case, ask for any support and identifying. So and then as well, I got to be a consultant with the Minnesota Department. So that's really about it. We do collaborate with other organizations. It's good to have allies, and so there's a couple other anti-trafficking organizations in the state of Minnesota. So yes.
Strength in numbers.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I've mentioned a few times in this show that Action 169 provides trauma-informed, faith-centered counseling to women who have experienced commercial sex exploitation. Can you tell our listeners and viewers what is trauma-informed faith-centered counseling?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a holistic approach, addressing body, spirit, soul, and is comprehensive. So, for example, we are big on expressive art therapy, sometimes 12-step facilitation if there's substance use there, sober support. It's person-centered, so anything trauma-informed is person-centered. So, for example, when a gal comes in, I'm going to sit with her and we together, her verbalizing her goals and what she wants are going to create what I call an individualized restoration plan. So, each person is unique. There's different needs. And so not all the plans, all the restorative care isn't going to look exactly the same, although there are some things, that we encourage for each person. So.
And how does trauma-informed counseling differ from traditional counseling?
That's kind of a tough question. I would say that for any counselor, therapist, anyone having direct contact with someone who has been exploited or where there's that trauma, they at this point should be using a trauma-informed approach versus however it was before. This is just all I've known. I think honestly before there were words for it because I had to go through my own restorative care that was unique to my needs.
And can you describe the elements of faith-centered counseling? Is it simply return to, or in some cases, an introduction to biblical teachings?
I like that analogy, an introduction to biblical teachings, because I definitely don't ever want to, cram the word or, if somebody is they're just not sure yet. I mean, a lot of times women, either they don't believe or they're mad at God. I get it. I understand. And so really it's just meeting them where they're at. And, when we had a couple gals, when we are having women here, Rose House coming in for restorative care, there was an option to do Bible study. It wasn't, but every single time they said yes, yes. And so it's just, again, meeting somebody where they're at. Love is not forceful. So.
And what is holistic restoration and how does it differ from traditional approaches to healing and recovery?
Yeah. So again, it's the whole comprehensive body, spirit, and soul. So body, let's make sure that you're getting good exercise. Let's talk about healthy nutrition. Body, spirit, there's that whole faith aspect, spirituality, right? And then soul, your mind, emotions, and will. Let's, look into it might be meeting with a therapist, it might be working on reframing mindsets, right? Working cognitive behavioral therapy. So again, it's the mind, body, body, spirit, soul.
And you've mentioned that these are all personalized sessions, I'll call them.
Yeah.
And you talked about how everyone who's come through has gone through the Bible readings. Making it personal again, do you involve or navigate each woman's own faith community in the healing process?
Yeah, I mean, from the gals I've met with, some will be more interested and others aren't as much. And honestly, it's really sometimes planting seeds to a faith. I mean, my faith, of course, is extremely important to me, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be for somebody else. I do believe that that's a huge answer. But again, I also believe in just meeting somebody, where they're at. And yeah.
What kind of training and qualifications should a counselor have to effectively provide trauma-informed, faith-centered counseling?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the trauma-informed approach, holistic approach, understanding cognitive behavioral therapy. One of my favorites is motivational interviewing. And I mean, that's definitely one of my favorites, and I use it often. And anybody that has had direct is meeting directly with the women that we serve, we have a course where we actually teach the motivational interviewing to them.
And maybe as a follow-up, are there ethical considerations that are unique to trauma-informed, faith-centered counseling?
I can't really think of anything off the bat.
Well, maybe how do you ensure that you're maintaining a balance between professional psychological practices and faith-based guidance?
Yeah, boundaries. I mean, and this is something that we have a gal on our team. She's a psychotherapist and she is great. I mean, if I'm struggling with something, I know that I can go to her, and she can, point me in the right direction. because definitely don't want to get too entangled. And, something else I learned years ago is not to take home what somebody is struggling with. I mean, because of course I'm praying for these women. Of course I want them to do well. But then, I have my family. I'm a new mom, right? And so they're number one.
We talked about the challenges in combating sexual exploitation itself, but what are some of the biggest challenges faced in trauma-informed, faith-centered counseling, and how do you overcome them?
When I say we, I say like the anti-trafficking movement. There's a lot of people doing some really incredible work. The organizations that have beds, that have restorative care available, need support. There's not enough beds, not enough spaces. And then the ones that are in place, they might be struggling just to be able to pay their staff, right? And so, any chance, listeners, especially any chance you get to be a support to a ministry or organization that you believe in, our support partners make it happen, right? And so, yeah.
And I know that some women do return to the sex trade for various reasons. Are you able to ensure that the women you care for maintain their progress and continue to heal after counseling ends?
I was thinking of one individual with this, question is, I know she's back. I know that she's back working in escorting. And so it's just maintaining, a relationship where it's on her. How do I say this? Where if she reaches out, we can be there, but we're not, pursuing her down like, hey, get out, Some of the women have stayed out. Some have gone on to have, amazing life changes, but no, we can't ensure. I don't really think anybody can, it's, we all have different, stages in life and go through changes. It's always great when there's an incredible success story. But the truth is, when someone goes through the trauma of exploitation, there is a road of recovery. There's a road of healing. And, sometimes they might step back into it and then come back out again and, a year later. So, that's the reality. That's the truth of it.
What long-term support strategies do you recommend for women who have completed trauma-informed faith-centered counseling?
Yeah, get involved in community, having a support group of some kind. If your faith is important to you, getting involved in a Bible study, having support, having good communication, healthy support, having boundaries with those who aren't healthy for you, good self-care, right? So body, spirit, and soul.
A moment ago, you mentioned how you can't take it home with you, for lack of a better phrase. How do you protect your own mental and spiritual well-being, especially having experienced the trauma yourself?
Yeah. Prayer, my relationship with Jesus Christ, exercise. My husband and I, so we've been married, oh goodness, 15 years, 16 years, something like that. And we were married just about 10 years before having children of our own, and we ended up adopting, and they are both the answer to prayer. And so right now, I'm actually in a season of transition where I am so much more focused on being a mother. And so, I get the opportunity to bring on board somebody who's in the season of their life where they can be more, involved in counseling and support and being here all of the time. So, but I learned early on, especially working, in the substance use, counseling, is how to. I had a counselor one time say to me, picture everything and, put it in your hands and then just lift it up, give it to God. Like he's after these individuals more than you are. And so, self-care is absolutely key. We can't burn ourselves out. I wasn't going to burn myself out. So
we have just a few minutes left in the show. First, please share with our audience how they can help Action 169 and how they can contact you and your organization.
Yeah, so everything is right on our website, action169.com. There's information there. Of course, prayer support is always great. We actually have a free download. We're big believers in prayer, so you can always pray for us, pray for those that we serve. But then also donations support is also good, financial support. And then there's volunteer opportunities as well. All of that is on action169.com.
And Danielle, guests always have the final word in the show. And I always like to have them take us to the end of our conversation with advice or a story that helps our audience become more resilient and more empowered. Would you share with us what gives you hope?
Right away, this is what came to mind, is that each person, no matter what they're doing, can be a part of the solution. So whether it is a prayer, taking a few minutes and saying a prayer for an organization. I mean, it is, we've had our ups and we've had our downs. And again, I really believe that because our foundation has been, faith-based, there's been some incredible things that happen, but the foundation is sturdy, right? So just know that your prayers matter, your support matters. So say there's an organization or ministry you believe in, any support matters. And gosh, I'm just trying to think of a story. I share this one so much, I'll keep it really, really short. So we've been doing outreach, strip club outreach into this specific club for years. The gals recognize us when we come in. We come in, and one of the gals runs over in her stilettos, and she's, crying, tearful, wants to talk. We go into one of the little dressing room or little rooms with the pole, and she's, sobbing. And I'm just listening to her and just thinking, okay, what am I supposed to say? Right. And this is what came to mind. So when I'm down, a lot of times I will sing. I love singing. I sing scripture, but I love singing. And, I said to her, when you were little, did you like to sing? And she said, yes, I did. Well, what song did you sing? And she said, Yes, Jesus Loves Me. And so I said, well, do you want to sing it? So we end up singing Yes, Jesus Loves Me right there in the strip club, and it's loud, and she is crying. And the presence of God, I can feel the presence of God. She's having like this peace encounter, like just transformative. And we've been able to keep in connection with her, see changes, right? And the wild part of the story is that about a week later, this strip club burnt down to the ground. It was by accident of one of the gals flicked her cigarettes in the dumpster outside, and it like caught on fire, right? Well, all the girls go to the next strip club anyways, but it's quite the story. Like, I really believe that there was a moment in her heart, like there was an altar built where she had an encounter with God. But those stories matter, right? And each person supporting any organization that has direct contact with women who are in the industry, it matters.
Danielle Freitag, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.